Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be continuing a build series on Ryan's Ranger. This is something that we've been talking about for a while now, and the time has finally come to get into this thing. What is kind of the plan for this thing?
We're literally redoing everything on this truck.
Yep, so you guys can see kind of the current state of the truck. We had gone over to Ryan's yesterday, helping him get the bed off, and then he drove the thing over here, and Christian and Ryan really tore into it and started breaking things down.
Right now, we got everything stripped off of it, so gas tank's out of it, leaf springs are off of it. Before we took the housing, the factory housing, the 8.8 that it had in it, we took all the measurements for wheelbase and then just a couple different things so I can, now that we have the new housing in here, I can get this centered in the truck. But the game plan is to get the wheelbase set, and then I'm cutting the whole frame rail off.
Right, and we were just talking about wheelbase a little bit already.
Yeah.
What is kind of the current setup, and do you know what you're going to be aiming for on wheelbase?
I don't know exactly what we're going to end up at, but the wheelbase, the factory wheelbase on this regular cab long bed truck is 113 inches long. So I'm going to be shortening it just enough to where the fiberglass overlays the cab right here, so it has like the nice seamless look, just kind of similar to our truck. Yep. So you don't have a big gap here between where the factory would have the bed and then the cab. So it'll probably end up being like a 3-inch gap that gets sucked in, so it'll be around 110-inch wheelbase, which is short, yeah. But for this truck it should be totally fine.
Yep, for you guys that know, like 110 inches, like Christian was saying, is really short. For reference, our truck sits right around 135 inches, so we have quite a bit more wheelbase on our truck, and this thing's going to be a completely different animal.
Yeah, and like the ideal wheelbase, like what most trophy trucks are, is around the 120 to 125 is like the optimal wheelbase for a truck. But with how light and small this thing's going to be, I think it's going to be totally fine. And with the fuel cell, you will see all the parts that are going to get put on this thing, but the weight placement will play a big part in that too.
Yep, it's going to be fun. That's kind of a big milestone for us to actually cut the rear of a truck off. Like on the 92F1 build, we kept the frame rails. That way you have a structure that you can build off of and you know everything's straight and aligned correctly. So this is going to be kind of a big endeavor and just a good stepping stone to finally move to that. Yeah. And really go like for the full back half on a truck.
And it would make my life a lot simpler if I was just doing like the standard just either weld on or bolt on pivots that go on the frame, and then cut the frame off after that. But I want to do pivot boxes on this truck, which means the lower and upper link mounts are one unit all together, and that has to go where the frame gets cut off at. So it makes things a little bit more difficult on my side, but I think overall it's going to end up being a lot better.
In the end, it's going to be sick, and you really get to dial in where your like full compression is. With the frame rail, we do C-notch it, but you really still are limited on that. And with this, you have your own kind of pallet to build off of, and you really set it on your own.
And what's cool about this wheelbase being shorter too is when it comes to doing the pivots, I'm going to tie the rear and front pivots together, so all the front suspension and rear suspension, it's all going to be one unit. And you'll guys see that in the videos once we get to that point. But with this being so short, it opens up some options to do some pretty cool stuff.
Cool. So that's kind of the back right now. We're just going to do a walkthrough of the truck in its current state, and then we do have some parts to show you guys at the end. So we've seen the rear. We'll discuss the rear end in a second as well, but let's jump to the inside and kind of check out what we got going. So things have definitely changed in here. Still got the baby shark going, so what's up to that dude right there? But what's the situation in the truck right now?
It's just gutted. So yesterday, once we got the truck here, Ryan already had the passenger seat out of it. But when it got here, we got literally everything ripped out of the interior of this thing. The dash is going. I'm going to be doing a custom dash in this. But just to keep it simple for now, without getting into all this stuff, we just got all the stuff basically from the dash back out of this thing. The headliner, carpet, all that stuff is out of it now. I do need to go in here and cut all the sheet metal out. Where it's going to be like in the way of the cage, just so I can get the cage as tight as possible. And then I think the back wall and the floor is going to get cut out too, to be able to do the pivot boxes and tie the B-pillar into this thing. So with this being a regular cab, the seat clearance, you could already kind of see like in the window, whereas old seats are already resting up against the window. So it doesn't leave very much room for a cage to go back behind the seats, how it would be in a normal truck with the B-pillar being behind the seats. So I think I'm going to do an external B-pillar on this thing, and then it'll kind of come in and land on the pivot boxes, so this back floor or the back wall will end up getting cut out.
It's always crazy to see these trucks when they're getting built and just see how much stuff is actually kind of thrown out and not used anymore. Yeah. It almost makes sense just to start with a cabin frame rail sometimes, because at the end of the day, that's all you're using in a lot of cases.
Realistically, perfect world, I'd rather just start with a cab. I don't even need the frame because the frame is just bulky and gets in the way, but with this, like, it's going to escalate to where this thing doesn't have very much frame on it, but it would be more ideal to start with literally just a strip cab and realistically just the shell of the cab. So the sides and the top, and then the back wall, the floor, and the firewall is all gone. And you just start with that.
It's crazy because when you see these trucks fully finished, it like you can't tell how much was really tossed out and like rebuilt. Like it looks like a factory truck since everything's just clean.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
so much stuff is just tossed out.
You guys will see it too, like throughout the process. You'll see how much gets cut out of this thing, and then all the tin work and stuff that has to go back into it to get it to what it looks like when it's finished. But it is a lot of stuff gets cut out of this truck.
Are you guys keeping? I'm assuming you're keeping the factory door panels.
We were talking about that since I'm already doing a dash in this thing. Like that's a solid deal. Like we know for sure that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing like a fiberglass dash. I'm going to hand make a dash for this thing. So since we're doing that, Ryan was talking about yesterday, like doing the door panels to kind of incorporate with the dash and have the same concept kind of throughout the truck. So we'll probably end up doing that. But yeah, there's not going to be really anything factory left in this truck
that's
at all.
gnarly. That's gnarly. Cool. So let's pop the hood and we'll take a look at the stuff that Christian has done previously on the truck and kind of talk about the plans for what's going to be done next. All right. So what's kind of going on under the hood right now?
Just a really simple, basic, like almost just engine crossover with some shock. I don't even know what you would call them. It's not necessarily like an engine cage. It's just like a shock coupe setup deal going on in here.
Just very simple engine cage to capture the shocks. And
Yeah.
I'm assuming most people on the channel would be familiar with this engine cage because the Ranger build series was the biggest one we have on the channel. So you guys are probably familiar with this. Not much to talk about in terms of that, but what are the plans for the front and what's going to be happening up here?
So everything that's here that I did previously is all getting cut out. This truck is going to end up running a coilover in the bypass in the front now. So obviously this wouldn't work. It's going to get a real engine cage up here, so it's going to be completely tied in. The factory core support's getting ditched, and then it's all going to be a tube structure that mounts like this header panel for the factory grille and headlights. And then the brake booster is more than likely going. I know for a fact that heat and AC is getting ditched in this thing, so it's just going to clean up a bunch of room to be able to fit the shock package on this thing. And then AC compressors obviously going. So we're just simplifying everything up here. The battery's going in the back now. So just try and clean up this whole area because the cage work is going to take up a lot of this space, and then just make it pretty much like it's going to be a race truck for the most part. Like,
Yep. And then as far as drivetrain goes, sticking with the 5-speed, sticking with the 4.0, and just building around that for now. And then do you know if Ryan has any plans in the future to kind of swap to anything else? Or?
Yeah, so this truck, when I build the engine cage for this thing, I'm going to build it around knowing that this truck is going to have an LS in it at one point. So just the dimensions of the engine cage will be a little bit wider than what this is. Granted, this 4.0 is probably pretty close in size to an LS, but I'm just going to keep that in mind when I build it because this truck will get a V8 power plant at some point.
Cool. So a lot's going to be happening up here. It's basically like you're rebuilding the entire truck.
Everything.
It's going to be
front bumpers getting cut off. The steering is probably getting ditched. We're still on the fence about beams, but we'll see about that when we get to that point. The radius arms for sure getting ditched. I'm redoing those because I don't like them. And like there's a lot of stuff. Basically everything that's on this truck now is getting pulled off of it, and we're starting pretty much from scratch, which is a good thing. And like it's
gonna be a lot, but it's gonna be cool to see this thing go together.
This truck is going to be badass when it's
gonna be a monster. This is gonna be like Christian's staple for Vital Designs, and like really showing off all the work that he does and that he's capable of. So it's gonna be cool to see this thing out there and like really just getting after it. So
yeah, so our truck right now is I call it VD1. That's the very first truck I've ever built. And then this truck being a complete truck front to back, this will be VD2. So every truck that I do front to back, all my own stuff, will be a VD version of what I'm doing.
And I'm gonna have like VD8 down the line. One of them.
VD 6.9.
Man, you gotta love that. So this is the shock package that is on the front now. It's just a King. It's a 2514.
Yep, 2514 with the compression adjuster on the reservoir. So the setup that's on it right now is great for what it was. But since we're doing a full back half on this thing and it's getting a bigger shock package for the rear, this truck is definitely going to get outdone with just a single coilover in the front. So we'll go over shock package in a second, but this is getting coilover and bypass, and it's reusing this coilover for the front.
Sure. I mean, yeah, no reason to get rid of that. Maybe a different spring rate once there's a cage and everything in the truck.
Yeah, it'll probably go up in rate just because right now the truck is somewhat light. And then once you throw a real engine cage, you throw a real front bumper on the front of this thing, cage in the cab, like we're going to be adding a decent amount of weight. So
yeah. So right now, Camberg unequal length beams. It's also got swing set steering on it that Christian produced.
yep, this is all stuff that I did.
Yep. So
When
this
was
has
that?
been what's
Like,
that?
It was like 2019-ish.
Ooh, I don't know the year exactly.
I think it was.
a few years back. But
It's crazy. It's crazy to look at like the level that my
Progression.
fab has like
Yeah.
progressed since.
For sure.
It's gnarly.
Yeah, you can even see that like on the 92F1 build. If
Yeah.
you go back and look at the like in the cab where everything was first started compared to the new front end, like it's a big difference.
Yeah.
So cool to see all this stuff, but a lot of it's going to be going and then replaced with some more goodies.
Yep.
So that's kind of the current state of the truck. Now we'll kind of go through, talk about some of the parts that we have for it that are going to be going on it. I think since the rear end's kind of already slung under the truck, might be a good kind of spot to start there.
And this housing, it's a Camberg 3.5-inch housing, full floater hubs. It's a 2.25-inch hub with 35 spline axles, so it's the same rear end that we have in our truck, and then that I have in the daily too. So obviously with the power that we have in our truck and the size tire that we have on our truck, and we haven't had any issues with the rear end, we knew putting it in this with a little, like a smaller power plant
Right.
and a smaller tire, this being a 35.
Right.
Like
Just
it's-
less stress on components.
Yeah,
for sure.
it's gonna. This thing will have absolutely zero issue in this truck. And then I've already gone ahead and did the rear brake lines on this thing. I got the hub set up with the crush washers already done, and then the lower link mounts, the billet lower link mounts are already on it, just tacked in place, so I can start getting everything cycled.
Yep. And then as far as kind of wheel and tire package, we did mention that it was going to be on 35s,
Gangster.
but got some Walker Evans here.
A 15-inch Walker with a 35-inch BFG.
Yep, and these BFGs are also special. What was kind of the history of these? Because you don't see
It's
these
like
so often.
I want to say it's like a Dakar tire.
Okay,
or
that's
like
what I thought.
something like that. It's a KDR2.
Yep. So wheel and tire you don't see very often.
No.
And I think it's going to look really good on the truck. Just kind of looking at it here.
And there's 6, so he'll have 2 spares on this thing, and obviously all 4 on the truck. So it'll have plenty of wheel and tire for this truck, and then have the weight placement where it needs to be too.
Yep. And then has Ryan gone ahead and ordered the third member or the axles yet?
Yeah, he already has axles, and he already has a Evan Weller third for this thing.
Okay. And you said it was going to be a 6.0 gear set,
I want to say it's a 6.0. It's something really high. I can't remember if it's a 6.0,
which
to
is
be honest.
rowdy. That's a
It is,
lot
but
of gear.
with the 4.0 in this thing, with the 5-speed, and with the amount of weight that's getting thrown at this truck, when it's all said and done, like it should be. I don't know if it's a 6.0. It's somewhere up in that range.
Yeah, with the
But it's-
35, that seems wild.
It's crazy, but it's also 5-speed, so like
Yep.
it has plenty of gear to be able to go through. And
Yep.
when you're in the dirt, you want to be in the power. With the 4.0, it should be good.
Right, and just for you guys out there, once you start going into these higher gear sets, there is some risk with a 9-inch third member. Reason being, once you start adding a bunch of teeth, they get a lot smaller, so they're not as strong. So if you have really big tires or a lot of power, you end up just start rolling through third members and blowing that stuff apart. But with something like this where you do have a smaller tire and less power, shouldn't be as big of a concern, and you should be able to get by with it.
Yeah, it should be totally fine.
But definitely worth mentioning that. But that's the rear end now, and I'm sure you guys will be seeing some more of that once Christian gets the link slung on there.
Yep.
So going over here,
Shock package.
we have some good stuff to look at.
Obviously, you saw coilovers already on it. It's a 2.5 14-inch coilover, and then it's going to be paired with a 3.0 14 or 16-inch 5-tube bypass. And this is the race series with a big finned resis on it, big resi port on there as well, and then it's got a 1-inch mid compression tube on it, and that's just helping with fluid flow. So your mid compression tube is going to be basically like your ride height zone, and you want that to be kind of as plush as possible, especially with all the razor chatter and stuff that's out in the desert nowadays. Having that bigger mid compression tube just helps with that. You can kind of open it up a little bit more and flow more fluid through there, and it takes away that chatter as much as possible.
Cool. So really cool shock package on this thing. It's always good just to see fresh shocks as well.
Yeah, it's a unit.
So as far as rear, we do have the coil over here, 2.5 by 16-inch stroke.
Yep.
Which is the same thing that we have on our truck, and it's kind of really a standard for these trucks. It's usually 16-18 in the rear, sometimes an 18-20 combo.
That's like more full size stuff. You don't see 18-20 on a small mini truck like this ever.
Right, and when we say that, we're referring to the coilover stroke and the bypass stroke. So it'd be a 16 on the coilover and an 18 on the bypass.
Yes.
So front will be 14-16 and rear will be 16-18.
And typically, always with shock package, you're always going the next size up for the bypass.
Yep.
Because you got to think, especially like in the rear on a trailing arm, the way that everything cycles in the motion ratio, you need a longer shock that goes behind, so it's stroking the right way when everything groups out.
Mm-hmm. So that's what we got here. What's kind of special about these ones? I know you talked about the fronts.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same deal we got going for the rear
Same
bypass.
thing, yeah. So it's going to be a 2.5/3.0 shock package all the way around with a 2.5 bump all the way around as well. It's a 2.5 inch stroke shock or bump stop in the front, and then a 4-inch stroke bump stop in the rear.
Yep.
But it's all race series bypass, and then obviously finned resis all the way around with the big resi port as well, just to get as much fluid flow through there. And then same thing with the 1-inch mid compression tube.
So really cool shock package on the truck. It's gonna be cool to see this thing actually working with all this stuff.
Yeah, this truck will work very well when it's done.
Yep, so that's kind of the basic parts list. We have some more stuff over here that we'll kind of jump over and show you now. We have the fuel cell, which we're not going to pull out, but do you want to talk about what's going in the truck?
Yeah, so it's literally the identical fuel cell that we have in our truck. It's a 50-gallon fuel-safe enduro cell, so it's got the taper to it. Obviously good cell. It's got the bladder and stuff in it, so this thing will be literally perfect.
Especially with the 4.0 too.
Yeah.
Getting much better gas mileage than we're getting with an LS.
With 50 gallons of gas, if he fills up, he should be able to drive this thing to the desert, drive around all weekend, and then drive home on one tank.
Which is nuts to think about. We definitely
it's not going to be cheap,
we
but it'll
we
be...
don't have that option. But cool. Since this is open, as far as calipers go, Willwood, or at least the 4 pistons that they have?
4 piston caliper.
Okay, and then what? I know they have a few different series. Is it the super light? Is that what it is? Okay.
Super light caliper.
And then do you know the rotor size that's on here as well?
It's a 12-inch rotor.
Cool. So definitely going to be some better stopping power than the stock rear end.
Yeah. Because what's funny too is like when we were pulling everything apart last night, the brake line, when I cut this brake line off, that goes to the housing because we're scrapping everything anyway, so I just cut it with a pair of dikes. When I cut it, no brake fluid came out of it. And he's like, oh, that's probably why the rear end wasn't working right.
My
Jesus, dude.
Man, so this should be a little bit better than no brakes, I'd assume.
And even if we do, right now it's got the booster on it, even if we do end up deleting that, doing all this stuff off manual brakes, just like our truck, like you still have plenty of braking power. So it should be really good.
Rad. And then as far as some other parts we got going, you guys saw these trailing arms get built in the last video. That was for this truck, as we mentioned. So we already have that all ready to go. And then we have the front hubs and the whole setup for that.
So these, I assembled these a while back. So everything's already together. So Camberg 2-inch hub, same thing, Willwood Superlight 4-piston calipers, and it's got the Camberg uniball spindle.
Yep. So this is the same spindle we run on our truck. We modified it a little bit, as you guys saw in the videos. Which, if you end up going, or Ryan ends up going equal length on this, the steering arms are going to need to get swapped.
I'm probably going to have to cut those off regardless and redo that, but
okay,
it's just one of those things.
But yeah, really nice to have that. It's a really good upgrade over the stock stuff, and it's going to be a lot stronger. So stoked to see that going on this truck, and then matching caliper and rotor on the front, I'm assuming, as the rear.
Yeah.
So just a super good package all around, and it's going to work really good on this truck. So that's kind of a basic breakdown on the current state of Ryan's Ranger. You guys are going to see some more updates on this as progress comes. Let us know what you guys think of the whole build down in the comments. But that's going to wrap it up. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.